What is the secret to unlocking your full potential? What makes your idols any different than you? How do you become the person you've always wanted to be in life? This is where you get all of your questions answered. My name is Justin Shank, and I sit down with some of the most epic individuals who are changing the world with their actions in business and in life. We discuss how they did it, why they pushed themselves, and more importantly, how they were able to focus on continuous growth to achieve their dreams. Welcome to the Growth Now movement. This week, I sit down with Commander Kirk Lippold. Commander Lippold was the commanding officer of the USS Cole, which came under a suicide terrorist attack by Qaeda in the port of Aden, Yemen. During his command, he and his crew distinguished themselves by saving the American warship from sinking. This event is widely recognized as one of the most brazen acts of terrorism by Al-Qaeda prior to September 11, 2001. As an engaged leader and a solid practitioner of hands-on crisis management, Commander Lippold has become a go-to global security expert for major news networks. The former commander of the USS Cole demonstrates for audiences what he sees as the foundation of team success and time-critical decisions based on integrity. This conversation is absolutely life-changing. We get into the emotions that he experienced when the ship was under attack and how he handled it as the leader, the things that he did wrong, that he openly discusses with us, and his routines that he still practices today that he believes is the key to his success. I think you guys are really going to have a lot of takeaways from this episode on leadership, on being a human, and really stepping up in times of crisis. Now, before we get to the episode, I want to remind you guys that Growth Now Movement Live is happening September 25, 26, and 27 right here in Reading, Pennsylvania, and obviously would love to have you guys there. So head over to gnmlive.com, get your tickets now, and I can't wait to see you there. Now, without further ado, let's get to the episode with Commander Kirk Lippold. Commander, welcome to the show.
Oh, great to be on, Justin. Thanks for having me.
For sure. You know, Philip Stutz introduced us, and Philip has now been on the show twice. And obviously great conversation. And he mentioned you and your story. And I'm like, yes, let's have this conversation. Not only ever, like even if we weren't going through the COVID-19 crisis, you know, country shutdown or worldwide shutdown, I'd still want to have this conversation. But why don't you take us back to that day in 2000 on the USS Cole when everything shifted in your world in an instant? What was that like? Let's go there.
Well, we had been operating in the Mediterranean for about 6 weeks, having deployed in August of 2000, gone through the Suez Canal. And one of the things is Aden, Yemen, which sits at the southwest corner of the Arabian Peninsula, is kind of a halfway point between the Mediterranean and the Middle East. So a lot of times we would stop in that port for fuel. We were going to be the 27th Navy ship over the last couple of years. We pulled in that morning for what we thought was going to be routine refueling, taking on 250,000 gallons of fuel before we would head into the Middle East, get our in-theater briefings with Fifth Fleet in Bahrain, and then go to the North Arabian Gulf. We pulled into a pier at the middle of the harbor. We were alongside and had started the refueling operations for about 45 minutes. We were ahead of schedule because what we thought was going to be a 300 to 500 gallon per minute fueling rate actually turned into 2,000 gallons a minute. So it turns out we were actually going to be there only for about 2 to 2.5 hours. We had started the noon meal. We're ahead of schedule. Things are going great. And one of the things we had done was contract for 3 garbage barges to come out that morning to take off trash. 2 came out, 2 left, third boat comes out. Looked just like the other ones, 24-foot center console. Unlike what the press reported, it was not a Zodiac that raced across the harbor and rammed us. It literally came down the side of the ship. 2 guys in it stood up and even waved to a couple crew members topside standing security, came to the middle of the ship and detonated. And we experienced what no one else had ever seen. It was a suicide attack with a waterborne improvised explosive device. And literally, from operations normal, everything changed. We were in a full-blown crisis with a 40 by 40 foot hole in the side of the ship, and we were scrambling. So somewhat like the nation experience, but it took days to really recognize and then a couple weeks to grasp the enormity of what we were going to do in shutting down. We went from ops normal to that situation. And this is why you trust and invest and believe in your people, because The crew fell back on their training. The announcing system for the ship to tell them what had happened, where to go, and what to do failed. The backup system failed. They literally fell back on their training, formed small damage control teams, began to go around the ship, and essentially divided into 3 groups. It was either damage control teams trying to contain the damage that had occurred to the ship. It was triage teams to get the wounded up to the middle of the ship and start doing everything they could to save their shipmates. And then it was literally everyone else was providing security for the ship to make sure that we didn't suffer through a secondary attack. Because obviously one of the hallmarks of terrorists is hit them once, wait for people to react to it, and then hit them again, trying to take them out on a more permanent basis. So we literally were able to get the ship, even with that immense amount of damage in the middle of the ship, stable within a little over an hour. As a testament to how well the crew did. Initially, we literally hollered at the fuel workers down on the pier who leaned a ladder up against the side of the ship. We would slide metal litters via ropes onto a ladder down to the pier where they would untie them, run them over, put them in a boat, and take them ashore till we could get a gangplank down, because we hadn't put one down. We're only there for a brief stop for fuel, not a port visit. So no one needed to go ashore. Got that down and settled, and then literally we were able to evacuate 33 wounded off the ship in 99 minutes. And as a testament to how well the crew did, of those 33, 32 had survived. Now, unfortunately, 17 sailors killed, ultimately 37 wounded. But as a testament to how well the crew did, again, they saved that ship, which has recently undergone a major midlife overhaul and upgrade. And she is now going to continue to serve our nation probably for the next 15 to 20 years.
That's amazing. And so when you think about that moment of when those explosives detonated, what was going through your mind as the leader of this ship? Like, what was your first, like, okay, what is that? Because I know you said they immediately started to kind of form their groups and go through their training. What was your thought process in that moment, obviously after years of training?
In the instant it occurred, I think I thought like everyone else on the ship. We had suffered a major fuel explosion, especially at that rate. And as it turns out, as you know, you go through life looking through your lens, and your world is like a straw, sometimes a little bigger, sometimes a little smaller. In my case, that lens slammed wide open, and I was taking in huge amounts of information without even realizing it. And literally that 18 plus years of training that I had gone through in the Navy to get to that point where you say the 3 greatest words in your career, I relieve you, and you're now responsible for that $1 billion+ national asset. You've got almost 300 sailors' lives in your hands. I realized that when we pulled the ship in and moored it starboard side or right side to a pier in the middle of the harbor, when the explosion had gone off, we'd been thrust up and to the right. If it had been a fuel explosion on the ship or the pier being next to a stationary object, we'd have been shoved left. So instantly I knew, with nothing on the left side but open harbor water, something had come alongside, detonated, and right then I knew it was a terrorist attack. Grabbed the 9mm, went down to the middle of the ship, and literally took a deep breath and said, well, this might be your destiny, but you're at least going to go down fighting for your ship. And rolled out thinking, you know, if this is going to be it, so be it, but you're going to defend your ship.
Yeah, that's crazy. And keep in mind, as people are listening to this was before 9/11. Like, this is before terrorist attacks to Americans were even really a thing when you really think about it. Now, August of 2000, I was in my summer before my senior year of high school. To be completely honest with you, I didn't even know about this attack until Philip brought you up, and I looked into it, and I'm like, this is crazy. But this was a precursor to all of that. So how could your mind so quickly shift to, this is a terrorist attack? I mean, is this something you were trained on? Is this like, hey, this could happen?
Well, one of the things that we continuously train for in the Navy and the military, especially when you're conducting independent operations and you're by yourself, is you have to anticipate the unexpected. Mm-hmm. And if something happens that you didn't expect, now the first thing you need to do is, okay, what can I do to mitigate the damage? What can I do to control what has happened? And then what can I do to begin to recover from it? And we literally would begin recovery efforts almost immediately after, and going through that evening. By the next morning, the fresh water had been restored to the ship. Luckily, we had a connection on the pier that we could use. That allowed the crew right from the beginning to be able to have water to sustain themselves, because obviously staying hydrated in that type of combat environment is more critical than food. But we would also get food from local hotels until some other ships showed up the next day and over the next few days. So it was really, I'll be honest, Justin, I can't explain why I was there at that moment. You never know how Providence is going to guide your life. All I know is that in the instant that it happened, all I could think was, okay, you've just been given the gift of command. And the only two things that you need to focus on is, what do you have to do to save the ship, and what do you have to do to save the crew? Nothing else mattered.
Wow. And you literally just said something that is crazy to think about. You go, you've been given the gift of command. And so when I think about that saying, and you think about leadership, a lot of people are afraid to step into that type of role. When you think about that from an out, like if you were to say to me, like, this is the role you're going to be in, there's going to be a terrorist attack and you need to lead this crew of 300, sailors through this whole thing, I'd be like, no, I'm good. Now you just said, I've been given the gift of command. When did that start for you? That desire to be a commander, to be a leader, to be all these things, as you're now going through and teaching the world how to be a true leader?
For me, it probably began 5 to 6 years after I had been in the Navy. I think, like a lot of young men and women, I graduated out of the Naval Academy. I said, hey, I'm going to do my time, and then I'm going to, head on to greener pastures and find other things to do in life. Looked at the Naval Academy, and like a lot of graduates say, it's a great place to be from. Mm-hmm. But as I began to stay in the Navy and realize what service to the nation meant, what being responsible for the young men and women that I would lead at the division level on 2 different ships, and then going on to the department head level, going to the Navy postgraduate school and getting my master's degree, I began to realize, okay, you're committed to this. This is going to be a calling for you, because like any job, there are going to be days when you're going to be frustrated and you'd rather be announcing the blue light special at Kmart. But at the end of the day, you realize that there are going to be days where it's not fun, but there are also going to be those same days where you're going to get a tremendous amount of satisfaction at doing the job right, at being responsible for and leading the young men and women who, in our case, walk up the brow and onto your ship, or walk through the front door of your business. And the one thing I will tell people is, you have to develop that capacity to risk. Because when you risk, what you are doing is you're expanding your comfort zone. You are learning as you do it. But unless you learn how to take risk and grow yourself personally, that then enriches yourself professionally, which allows you to expand yourself in your business.
I love that. And obviously, the military is something that really sets you up for success in leadership because of the things you're taught. And I've had so many great veterans on my show that really kind of talk about those types of things. And, being able to lead somebody through crisis or terrorist attack or whatever can be game changing for the individual, can be game changing for the business. And I said, when I hit record, I said, this is the perfect time. And I would have loved to have this conversation no matter what, but right now is the perfect time because this world is going through a crisis in its own. Now, it's not a terrorist attack, but it is something that is attacking businesses, it's attacking families, it's attacking livelihood. So what have you seen from a leadership standpoint? What do people need to do right now to begin to navigate the distress people are going through during this time?
Justin, that's a great question. And I think the number one I would still tell people, I use it as a foundation piece, and that is, as a business, people are watching you. They're watching how you are going to react. They're watching how your business is conducting itself. And at the end of the day, it comes down to one word, and that is integrity. Now, if I reached out to your audience and say, how many of you have integrity? Every single one of them is going to say, I have it. If you ask them about their businesses, they're going to say, look, integrity for me, it's a personal value, it's a family value, it's a corporate value. But what does that word really mean? And I'll tell you, a lot of people say, well, Integrity is doing the right thing at the right time for the right reason, even if no one is looking. And I'll say, no, that's ethics. If you want integrity, it's making all those correct, right, ethical decisions, regardless of the consequences. Because it's when people start to measure up the consequences of their decisions that they unfortunately find justification to bend that line, to gray it a little bit, or worse yet, lower it. In our case, in the military, we can't afford to do that. Lives are at stake. Businesses today, especially in this environment where you are truly being challenged, you can't afford to lower that bar. People want to know that even in the tough times, you as a business are still going to do the right thing for them, for the product you're selling that they're buying. If you're in the investment world or the financial world, you've got people's livelihoods in the palm of your hands as they're struggling to get through this financially. So that's why I think that key word more than anything else matters. And then I'd say the flip side on that coin is taking time to trust your people. Obviously, right now, business has learned a hard lesson in that, in fact, if you let people go work remotely, they're going to get it done. They're going to contribute. And, we chatted a little bit about before the show started, but when you really look at it, what it forced businesses to do is something that they should have been doing years ago. And that is not just trust your people, but develop the true metrics to measure performance by. Because now that they've got those metrics, now that they know that work is not just being on site to watch people with their head down at their little cubicle working away like they should have been all along, they in fact can get it done. And you have to allow flexibility. I mean, it's not just that standard 8-hour day. It may be a 10 to 12-hour day because they've got daycare problems. They've got kids they're working around. The dog needs to get a walk. Everybody's at home. You've got a certain amount of bandwidth. But at the end of the day, so long as they're getting a productive 8 hours for you, that's what you're doing. So I think that the trust in people and people's trust in business has both flourished during this time.
Yeah. And, we were about 10 days into this whole thing. And I remember reading an article on LinkedIn, and it was about how commute working has advanced 10 years in 10 days. And that, by the way, that was when we thought this whole thing was going to last 14 days and everybody was going to go back to normal. And here we are 90 days in or whatever. And it was really mind blowing. And I realized that, my significant other, my girlfriend, she works from home and she has for many years and is extremely productive. And I feel like that is a way to be actually more productive than we are in the office. But how do you lead from that standpoint? Like, because you don't, like you said, you can't go spy on them in their little cubicle with their head down. How do you lead from that standpoint?
The biggest thing I think people will have to do when it comes to this new environment that we're working in is not only adapt and adjust to it, because there isn't going to be a new normal for the foreseeable future. Leaders are going to be defined how well they adapt and adjust to the new environment. And when they do that, the number one thing you can do to help your people out is communicate with them. Communicate on a larger level. I mean, if you're running a large company, clearly you can't always reach down to the individual level. If you've got a smaller group, maybe you need to do that. Maybe you need to get down to the individual level or talk to your teams. Make sure you're in touch with your supervisors. And that ability to communicate is going to be much sooner. I mean, one of the complaints that I've heard across the board with a lot of folks is when it comes to supervisors, when I send you a task, don't hit reply to all. Please, because otherwise, the further up you go in any organization, your inbox gets slammed with all the replies. You don't need 50 people saying, thanks, got it, on it, and that's what happened is you have to realize you kick it out. Hey, you've got red receipts turned on. You got it. You know who's getting red receipts. Boom. Assume that they have it and don't create so much traffic. But it's that ability to communicate where maybe 3 times a week, you need to hold separate little group chats where all you do is, hey, let's get together. And it doesn't even need to be about business. It can also be about how are you doing? What are the biggest challenges you're finding at home? What are the biggest challenges you're finding with being able to work? What do you see as our biggest problems that we're having to face as an organization? And how can I do it? And develop that kind of input where you have that little bit more free flow of communication because you don't have that personal touch. And, there's a great picture that I have that it was taken the morning after the blast. And you had all the people standing security, all the people down below the waterline in those flooded spaces standing watch to make sure we weren't going to sink. And the rest of the crew is kind of sleeping spread out on blankets and pillows from the berthing compartments because we had no air conditioning, no power in the forward 2/3 of the ship. But sometimes communication's nonverbal. And just looking at those faces made me realize I'm going to have to communicate with my crew differently in how we survive this event. I think it's the same way with business leaders today. You're going to have to find personal ways to reach out, get out of your comfort zone and talk to your people. And like I said, you may do a Zoom conference, but maybe you need to do it and say, hey, I want a short one, but I don't want to talk business. I want to talk and find out how you're doing, what you're finding is your challenges. What are the biggest things you're having a problem with at home? And figure out, is there anything that the business can do to adapt and adjust to help them work through that?
Yeah. So when you think back to that day in Yemen and the blast, now you're the assigned leader. You're the commander of this ship. You're the guy who's in charge. But you had mentioned how your crew went and took their own leadership. And they did the things they needed to do almost instinctually through their training. What to you is a leader? And how do you define that? And then how can people step up into that type of role?
I think leadership comes with time and experience. I have never bought into this theory that, there's natural born leaders. Mm-hmm. I think what you see in leaders who have what a lot of people like to refer to as that gift is the tenets of leadership. When you really look at it, integrity, having a vision, making your people understand that they alone are responsible for their decisions and the consequences, trusting and investing in them, developing and giving them the professional competence they need by providing for the training, giving them the tools and the time to do their job right. I think leaders, when they do all those things and practice them, gain a sense of confidence. And so while it never becomes second nature, it can certainly become something that stuff becomes a matter of the fabric of routine operations every single day. And the people that work for them realize, hey, this man, this woman, whoever my leader is, they have my back and they trust in me and they're willing to invest in me in my future. And those are the kind of things that I think really make a leader, is that they develop that confidence that I can do these things and do them well, that I can look out for making my business, not only my business successful, but my people successful in my business.
So you talk about integrity and confidence. What are some of the other traits you feel like a strong leader should carry or start to build themselves over the years?
I think the biggest thing, and I mentioned it at the beginning, is a leader has to be able to what I call act in the now and think ahead. So whether it was the crisis with the explosion on the ship, whether it's the pandemic now, you have to have that ability as a leader to start asking what I call the what next question. When you start acting in the now and you're making decisions in the moment, who's looking downrange? Well, as the boss, you're the most experienced. As the leader, you're the one that people are going to be looking up to. And so you need to constantly be asking yourself, what do I need to think about next? What do I need to plan for next? And what do I need to do next? Because in my case, I knew within minutes that we were going to have wounded beyond ship's force capability to treat. We did not have a doctor on board. We had a chief hospital corpsman and a third-class petty officer. That's like a physician's assistant. And then it's kind of a very young, baby doc is third-class hospital corpsman. She was fantastic, but they're trained in a lot of medical stuff. They can do the routine, suturing, stitches, that type of things, give shots. But at the end of the day, they're not doctors. And I knew that if we didn't start figuring out how to get wounded off the ship within that golden hour, I was going to have a lot more casualties. So while I'm acting and making decisions in the now on how to save the ship, I'm also communicating with the Yemeni port authorities, figuring out how to get boats from the local hospitals out to the ship to be able to evacuate the wounded, figure out how to get them off the ship and down onto the pier, all those things. And I think as leaders, when you're developing that ability, you're constantly running through that. Okay, what do I need to think about next? How do I work and try and keep my company and my business ahead of the problem that's developing? Is there anything new I should do? What risks am I going to have to take? My risk was I'm sending them into a country that just had terrorists come out from it and blow a hole in the side of my ship. But I had to trust them, because if I didn't, they were going to die. That's a risk. Right. I took that risk knowing that I think, many people, for the most part, are genuine human beings. They don't want to see these things happen. And when they do, the Yemenis were doing the best they could given the circumstances in their hospitals, but they did phenomenal. And I think it's true of society as well.
I want to talk about emotions and empathy, and also strong-handed leadership at the same time, right? When I think about what you went through, to go up to them and say, look, here's your weapon. We're either going to go down with this ship in our country, or we're going to survive, and that's all we have, versus seeing them lie there, out in the heat, trying to sleep. How do you juggle all of those emotions as a leader while continuing to move them forward? I think at times, for most people, that would be kind of tough.
It was very tough. And as a matter of fact, it can be overwhelming. The book I wrote about the attack, called Front Burner, Al-Qaeda's attack on the USS Cole, in there I outlined where at one point, quite honestly, Justin, I was failing as a leader. Because when I was the captain immediately after the blast, obviously we had a very collapsed chain of command. It became very flat for a while. And then we gradually built it back up again, where we had the different layers between me, the executive officer, the department heads, to the division officers, to that mid-level layer of leadership, the chief petty officers that were there, the true backbone. But initially I was in a decision-making mode. Tell me what the problem is you're bringing to me. Tell me what the key points are that you want me to take into consideration. Let me ask any additional questions I have, and then you make a decision to move on. And, in a crisis like that, you have to make decisions. You cannot sit there and say, well, sometimes the best decision is no decision. That may be true in a benign, peaceful environment. We're not living in that now as a country. Everything is changing on a daily basis. We are still learning more about the disease. Everything about the ship, we were still learning. We had live electrical wires everywhere. We had fuel leaking everywhere. We thought there might be a major fire on board the ship. We had no firefighting water because the pipe had been blown away, and we needed to isolate it and get pumps back online. All those things were happening, but you still make decisions. And guess what? As you get better information, guess what else you're going to do? You're going to make better decisions. You're going to change. It may be a course correction of 5 degrees. It may be a complete 180. But you still, guess what? We're not politicians. You're allowed to change your mind. Change your mind, make a better decision, and move on. Nobody's going to call you out for it. They're going to commend you for having that confidence in your abilities as a leader to make a decision, change it, and make a better decision.
Such a great answer. And it's true. I think sometimes as leaders, people are afraid. Like, I love how you said we're not politicians. We can change our mind, because I think sometimes as leaders, people are afraid to change their mind, because all of a sudden it may show weakness, or it may show, oh, hey, I was wrong kind of deal,
Absolutely. And a point that I'll touch on is that when you talked about empathy, what ended up happening is I was in that hard decision-making mode that first day. It was Thursday. Unfortunately, Saturday night going into Sunday, my only operating generator quit. We went through 3 chances to restart it and couldn't. We were now literally hot, dark, quiet, and sinking next to a pier in a foreign port with a hole in our side. The situation at one point was assessed so bad that they woke the president up, President Clinton, and told him the ship's without power and sinking, and we don't think they can save it. Backed into a corner, we didn't give up. We got the ship, we got the generator restarted, got power back to pumps, saved the ship. But by Monday morning going into Tuesday, we were now recovering the 12 missing sailors trapped in the wreckage of the galley area, the mess line where we had been feeding the noon meal of chicken fajitas. Down in the engine room, there were trapped sailors as well. And by trapped, had been killed in the explosion, but obviously we wanted to get them headed home to their families in that long journey. But the crew over those next couple days, at about the 5-day point, rightly or wrongly, began to feel that I was so mission driven that I was not comprehending or understanding what they had been through and were going through. And I literally had to go sit in my darkened cabin at one point and have that heart to heart with myself and say, you are failing as a leader, and your people need to know and understand what you are going through. And so the next morning, I gathered the crew up and we had a very heartfelt conversation about what I was thinking, what I was doing, and why I was doing it. And at that point, the crew, I think, realized that I, in fact, was suffering as much as they did. 17 sailors under my command had been killed in a terrorist attack, but I needed to still be the captain to make decisions to get us out of there. But that doesn't mean that I didn't have empathy for everything that they were suffering through. The only thing I could tell them is, look, what we're experiencing here, the anger, the anguish, the nightmares, the agitation, guess what? They're all normal. Every one of us are going to have post-traumatic stress coming out of this. But do not let it become a disorder and conquer your lives. We're better than that. But we're going to have to take care of each other to get through it. And at that point, we did.
Yeah. And I love how you said, we're all going to have post-traumatic stress. Don't let it become a disorder. Obviously, this is something that so many people struggle with. What are some things people can do, whether it's post-traumatic stress from being in the military and being in war, or, just life in general, and the things that people can go through that they have post-traumatic stress about? How are you able to overcome the post-traumatic stress and become a leader now, in this corporate world, speaking all over the world once it opens back up, and, doing all those things? How are you able to overcome that? And what are some tips people can take into their own lives?
I think the biggest thing you need to do is realize that you're not an island unto yourself. And that the first and foremost, the people that you can talk to about it are those that have been through either the same experience that you went through or similar ones. Because a lot of people, sometimes we think that, it's just me that's thinking this way, when in fact it's not. It's that a lot of people are suffering through those same doubts, those same internal questions, those same, geez, am I really worthy? Did I make the right decisions? Because what could I have done? And, oftentimes when I'm out doing those speeches, I'll occasionally get a question from the audience. If you could rewind the clock and go back, what would you have done differently that morning? And I always get the same answer. I don't. I made the best decisions I could that morning as the captain about the ship's safety and operations. I can't change it. There is nothing I can do about it. And if I start spending the rest of my life asking the what next question, I will literally drive myself insane. And I just said, I'm going to live with that burden on my heart for the rest of my life. But guess what? I am comfortable with the decisions I made because they were the best decisions. Yes, 17 people got killed, but I didn't kill them. Al-Qaeda did. And that's a fundamental difference. Is there were a lot of people that wanted to blame me for that attack. And I just say, wait. No, let's not do that. Because there's a difference between accountability, responsibility, and blame. I'm the one accountable officer that morning. I want you to look at how my crew performed before, during, and after that event. And the fact that that ship is still out there today and as many lives were saved as we saved, that speaks unto itself. If you want responsibility, hey, that's a bearded guy that we landed, shot in the face in Abbottabad, Pakistan, stuffed into a body bag with 100 pounds of weight, and he's at the bottom of the Indian Ocean. And if you want blame, that's two guys that got into a boat thinking they were going to see Allah. And I'm sorry, they didn't end up there. They ended up all over the boat in the harbor. But at the end of the day, I just look at it and say, look, as leaders, you're going to make decisions. They're going to have an effect on people's lives. And when they happen, guess what? You made the best decisions you could at that moment. Okay? What you have to do is learn from those decisions to make better decisions in the future that are going to have more positive effect on the lives of the people who trust you to do what's good.
Wow. So powerful. Like, honestly, like if I were to say, and I don't say this often on the show, but go back and rewind the last 5 minutes and listen to that again. Like, that is so true, right? Like we can't live in regret. We have to make the right decisions in the moment. So we know in the future, we said we made the best decision we could at that time with the information that we had. And thank you so much for sharing that. I think that that's really, really can be life-changing for so many people if they look at things a little bit different. So, one of the things that I get to do because of this podcast is I get to interview some of the world's most successful people, however you want to define success. So my question for you is, what is your definition of success? And what are 3 things you do every single day to ensure that success for yourself?
When I look at success, the first and foremost thing is you have to be comfortable with who you are as a person. And you should always be striving to say, how can I improve? What am I going to learn new today? That's probably the number one thing I do is say, okay, no day is going to go without me learning something new. I don't care what it is. Just don't make it routine. Learn something new. Take on, whether it's watching a short documentary, whether it is listening to a podcast, learn something new every day. I think that's the number one key to success is you can never stop learning. And 3 things that I do every day is obviously 1, get up and make that commitment. 2, I have a little ritual that I follow. I'll share it with you. It's somewhat personal, I'll admit, is that when I get up every day, a lot of people have asked over time again, how do you remember your crew? And I say, well, for me, while the nation remembers Memorial Day once a year to honor those that have paid the ultimate sacrifice to our nation, for me, every day is Memorial Day because I get up and I put on the dog tags that I was wearing the morning the attack occurred. But I also have a third dog tag that on one side, it has the picture of the ship. And on the other side, it has the names of the 17 sailors that I lost that day. So that's my little ritual. And then the other thing I do is take a little time and thank God for the life I've been given. Because while tragic things may have happened, it's what you do with those tragedies and turn them around for the positive good of not only yourself, but more importantly, others around you.
I love it. And so we had talked before I hit record about how you've pivoted because you're somebody who, as a leader, you look ahead, right? You act in the moment, but you look ahead and see what the world can bring you. And as a keynote speaker, your life has completely shifted and altered because we're not doing live events at this very moment, but you've shifted to online and started, training and keynoting online. So my question for you is, how do people get a hold of you? How do they hire to bring you in to speak to their corporations or their organizations to help give this very important message now during this time?
There's actually a couple ways they can do it, Justin. The easiest is I do have a website. It's going to be just like my name, kirklippold.com, KIRKLIPPOLD.com. And there's a contact form on there. They can use that to reach out to me. Or they can just send me a note at info@kirklippold.com. That's probably the quickest way. Or they can actually go to the Kepler Speakers website, and on there is all my contact information as well, and they can work with them to get me there.
Awesome. I love it. Commander, obviously this show is called the Growth Now Movement. So I actually finish every single interview with this same question. And that question for you is, in your life, what has been your biggest moment of growth?
Biggest moment of growth was the split second that explosion went off. Because in that moment, as I put it, while I had stood on the deck of that ship 15 months before that and said those 3 words, I relieve you, and assumed command of that ship, it wasn't until that moment that everything that I had aspired to become in life, that I had worked so hard over those 18 years, suddenly distilled down into that one split second in time. And at that moment, nothing mattered to me except for my ship and my crew. I was even irrelevant in that. It was what I needed to do as the captain, and that is my moment.
Awesome. Thank you so much for, number one, serving our country in the way that you did. For protecting all of those people, but now really guiding so many people in this leadership type of direction that we all need right now, that we truly, truly need in the strongest sense of the word. Just thank you so much for what you do. I appreciate this conversation.
Justin, it's been wonderful to be on the show. I mean, Thank you so much. And thank you for the good questions as well, because they really did open it up a little bit. It's always fun to expand the brain housing group and talk about it a little bit, because I think there's just so much out there, and I truly have. I've been given a wonderful gift to try and share my experience with people to help them grow as individuals and help our country, and by the country I mean the economy, business, everything.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you guys so much for being a part of the Growth Now movement. This is how you can really help me out. If you guys enjoyed this episode, please share it out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all that fun stuff. And let's grow this movement to epic heights. And it's all going to be because of you guys. Thank you so much. And we'll see you next week.